Iowa, from your standpoint, I don't know much about them yet. Haven't studied them yet. Where are they at quarterback?
Well, that's probably the biggest question mark for Iowa, because Spencer Petras was a player who a year ago he played fine. He got off to a rocky start. He started the season a little shaky, but that's to be expected for a first-time starter. He kind of found his rhythm as the season progressed. But what's going to be really interesting, Jim, and I think that this is going to be a big factor in that week 1 game, is that when you look at the two quarterbacks, you look at Spencer Petras for Iowa, you look at Michael Penix Jr. for Indiana. The question for Indiana, obviously, is where is Michael Penix in terms of health? The question for me on Spencer Petras is, did he develop into a more consistent passer, a more accurate player in the offseason? But the other thing is that I don't think a lot of people are talking about this. Spencer Petras hasn't played in front of a crowd yet. And so playing that week 1 game against a team like Indiana in front of a packed Kinnick Stadium, that's not going to be an easy thing for him to do. So that's where my biggest question is for him. I think in terms of being a serviceable quarterback, I think he's fine. I don't think he's anything. I don't think he's anything great. But can he get the job done? Sure. I'm just curious to know what happens when Indiana brings that kind of pressure on the defensive line, when they bring it at linebacker. Obviously, they have an incredible secondary. And so doing that in front of the pressure of playing in front of, I don't know what Kinnick holds, 80,000 maybe?
Close to 80.
In front of a packed stadium, first game with fans in 2 years. I mean, that's a lot of pressure for a quarterback, even though he was the starter last season. Doing it in front of fans is a whole different ballgame. And Michael Penix, even though he's had troubles with health and even though he didn't play in front of a crowd last season, he does have that experience. He was the starter in 2019 until he went down. So I think that's a big factor in that game. So to me, I think Spencer Petras is fine. I question how he'll handle that kind of pressure, especially early in the game.
Yeah, and I've talked ad nauseum about Iowa's slow starts on top of that. So – and this is an Indiana team that is a veteran Indiana team on both sides of the ball and from front backwards. The defense is veterans from the line, the linebackers, and that secondary that you mentioned, which is Iowa is not going to be throwing the ball against Indiana. So they're going to have to rely on a running game to open up. And Iowa has always relied well on tight ends. They've always got big, bulky, good NFL-type tight ends. I would imagine that is something that they would really have to focus on in a game like this, where Indiana has one of the best secondaries in the country. So you've got this rookie quarterback. He is not going to be lighting it up against Indiana. So you're going to have to find some spots, some soft spots, and hope that your running game is doing something, or they have the potential to shut Iowa down.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is I think Tyler Goodson is good enough, their running back, to be the first 1,000-yard rusher at Iowa since 2017. And obviously the offensive line play, even though they lost some guys, I think it's still going to be fine. It's still Kirk Ferentz. It's still Iowa. They're going to be good on the offensive line. It doesn't really matter from a year-to-year basis who they lose or who they gain or whatever the case might be. But I think you bring up a great point in the fact that you're talking about tight ends, because they have a really good one in Sam Laporta. And there are a lot of question marks at the wide receiver room. I mean, outside of Tyron Tracy Jr., there aren't a lot of answers that they have. So you have one primary receiver, and then you have tight end Sam Laporta. I think they will target him quite a bit. I think that they're going to try to nickel and dime Indiana, and that's worked in the past if they can establish a ground game. But again, you're talking about Indiana's linebacker, Micah McFadden, probably one of the top. If he's not the best linebacker, he's definitely one of the top 3 linebackers in the Big Ten. And then you're talking about trying to throw on a secondary that includes Tywan Mullen, Reese Taylor, Jalen Williams, some of those other guys. Marcelino McCreary Ball comes back. So I just don't know where Iowa's going to have that ability to stretch the field. And I think that's advantageous for Indiana. That's why I like Indiana in this game. You get them early in the season. There's so many factors. But, yeah, I think in terms of Iowa's offense versus Indiana's defense, I think that's a matchup Indiana's going to win. As long as Indiana's offense is clicking and moving and able to move the ball on Iowa's defense, then I think that they should be favored in that game, in my opinion.
They're not currently, but I
No.
do too. I agree that they should be, because I think that while I put the Ross's guess up there, score Iowa 24 or Indiana 24-20. I don't think that Iowa's going to score that many points, because they're going to have to do it on the ground if they're able to do it. And while I think they can have some success, I don't see them having a ton of success against a veteran defense. And Indiana's offense, they have quick strike capability. I think that the running game is going to add a lot to their offense this year that we have not seen in the last couple of years, and it's just going to make it a more efficient offense. And man, Michael Penix can just throw the damn ball, and he can throw it hard and he can throw it deep. I can't imagine Iowa has that great of a secondary when you don't have that great of an offense to balance off of. So I think it could be. I'm not predicting the Indiana goes in and scores 40 points on the road at Iowa, but depending on how this offense uncorks and how together they are at the start of the season, they could be a quick strike, big score offense, especially with the advent of a running game.
Well, I think Iowa's secondary is pretty good. So what I would say, it's not that Michael Penix and the receiver group and Peyton Hendershot and Ty Freifogel can't pick up yardage that way, but what I would say is that's why it's important for Indiana to establish a running attack. Because if you can't, you're just trying to pick them apart, it's going to be a long day for Michael Penix Jr. I mean, I'm not saying they wouldn't win that way, but that their secondary is pretty good. Phil Parker's done an outstanding job coaching those guys, and they have a really good guy in Dane Belton back there too. So it's imperative that Indiana establish some sort of rushing attack in order to open things up, play action, to keep the defense guessing. Because if you have to throw 40, 45 times in that game, it's not going to work out well.
Yes, Iowa is on grass. It's natural. They're all natural grass still, right?
I honestly don't know. I can't even keep. I feel like Purdue and Northwestern are two of the only ones left. I think Iowa has field turf, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
I'm surprised that everyone hasn't gone to it just for the maintenance,
right?
Especially at the collegiate level. But maybe it works in for how they want it to be, because it's definitely a different surface, a different playing surface.
It is. Well, I've always wondered too, at a place like Purdue and Michigan State and some of these other schools where you have agriculture and turf management and that kind of stuff, I've always wondered if that's a factor into why they don't make that switch, because you get that type of hands-on experience for their students and instructors and things like that. I don't know if that's the answer. I could have just be overthinking it quite a bit there, but that's one thing that I've always thought about. I don't know if it's true or not, but
all you guys that are on Facebook there today, got to get you switched over to YouTube Live or to listen to us on YouTube. Ross asked, not that it matters, but looking forward to seeing the first depth chart for IU football. Yeah, it'd be a little interesting. But yeah, it's not too deep. Those guys are going to be playing just a ton.
Are there? I mean, this is from someone who covers the entire Big Ten, so I don't know every little detail. But I mean, to me, the question is who's going to be on the offensive and defensive lines. Outside of that, it seems pretty much set. I mean, is there something else to? I mean, I'm interested to see who's on the offensive and defensive lines. But other than that, I mean, I feel like we pretty much know.
And those are kind of set, really. I mean,
right.
You know who the players are. And like I said, even if you're too deep on that, you're going to be playing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
There is a difference for the starter, but especially on the lines. I mean, the offensive lines are usually those guys are in on every play. I mean, Matt Bedford is going to be in. Cam and all those guys, they're going to be – that's who you want in there. But, of course, certain plays, somebody gets hurt, rolls out. But the defensive line now, you'll sometimes have a little more rotation there, all down at distance, dictating that, changing the defensive call. So you'll have some changes there. But you're right. It's a rotation for the most part.
I think to me the biggest the intrigue from the depth chart standpoint is to kind of maybe see where a lot of these transfers land. Where are they cracking the two deep? Are they going to be starters? Are they going to be a little bit further down the list? That, to me, that's probably that. And again, like the offensive and defensive line, that's where I think it's the most interesting.
Forrest pointing out that they do have field turf. Ed thinks that both teams will have the jitters. Yeah. Yep. For about 5 minutes. That goes away fast, man. Trust me. That goes away fast. After that kickoff, and you either make that first hit, get that first hit, catch that first ball, whatever the case is, it goes away and things start to – the blinders really come in. But, yeah, I think that rust is a bigger thing to think about. What's first game back? Especially a team like Indiana, that's a precision type team. You know, their offense, it's a very precision type team. And Iowa's, I think of them more of a marching team. So it's going to be a contrast of styles.
Yeah, I think so. That's what makes this such an intriguing matchup. But I think, I think the questions are pretty much the same on both sides. I mean, I think Indiana's defense is probably more set, but in terms of the offense, you know, Iowa hasn't been great at running the football. Indiana hasn't been great at running the football recently. There's some questions about the health of Michael Penix. There's some questions about whether Spencer Petras can be that guy. Outside of their primary receivers, Indiana doesn't have a lot. Iowa doesn't have a lot. So I think when you look at the offenses, they're kind of pointing. It's like the Spider-Man meme. They're pointing at each other, and while Indiana has a little bit more experience and a little bit more talent, well, actually a lot more talent at quarterback, still some question marks. It's what makes it an intriguing matchup in that week one slot.